I'm Jeff Fritz with SoundStage.com, and I'm joined today by Josh Clark. He is the president of Rockport Technologies, and Andy Payor. He is the founder of Rockport Technologies. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well, Jeff. Good morning.
Hi, Jeff. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, you guys too. And I really appreciate you joining me because there's a new Rockport speaker that we wanted to talk about, and it is the Taurus Center Channel. And actually, there's one right behind Josh there on the screen. Josh, tell us about the Taurus.
Sure. Well, it's not the first center channel product that Andy's done over the years, but it's been about 10 years since we've had a center channel. Our existing customers have been asking us for years to bring out another center channel that would work with their stereo Rockport speakers. Because I would say a large percentage of our customers incorporate their stereos into full home theater systems. And in fact, many of the new customers we have, one of the first questions they have when they're looking at stereo speakers is, do you have a matching center channel? Our concept, and Andy and I have been talking about this for years now, is we wanted to come out with a center channel product that would be a true Rockport speaker that would have the dynamic range and the resolution and all of the neutrality, the hallmarks of Rockport, but would not affect the stereo imaging, would not put something big in between the speakers that would affect the stereo soundstage or the stereo experience visually in any way, or minimally, I should say. And so what that essentially means is we needed to make a relatively compact speaker that would have really big dynamic capabilities, and excellent low noise floor, which is standard with our products and our cabinets, so that it would resolve information, but it needed to be small and it needed to be very flexible in terms of how you could install it. You could put it on the floor with a floor stand. You could put it on with a shelf mount. You could accommodate different listener heights, because in some home theaters, there's even tiered seating. And of course, you also have to negotiate the center channel with the screen. Sometimes that would necessitate it being very low or even very high, sometimes above a screen. So it's a lot of technical challenges to fit really, really good sound and the things that we like to do and we're known for doing in our stereo products into a really small speaker. And I really believe that we've done it. And well, we'll continue talking about it, but that's sort of the overview.
Well, what interests me when I actually saw the press release for the Taurus, first it's a proper three-way speaker. It's a four-driver speaker, but a three-way speaker. And so I know it has that hallmark, or at least I would imagine it has that hallmark big dynamic Rockport sound. But you mentioned, the Rockport customers, and right now I know there are four stereo speakers in your line from the Atria right up through the Lyra. Will the Taurus match with all of your stereo speakers currently?
Well, I'll take this one as well. That was the design criterion. It had to work well with an Atria-based system or a Lyra-based system and everything in between. We're certainly not saying that this speaker cabinet is at the level of a Lyra cabinet, but it's for its frequency range and dynamic range, it's going to hang right in there with a Lyra. And that was sort of the point. We wanted to keep up with a Lyra. We want it to play well with an Atria. We don't want it to be too big or too expensive. So there were a lot of things that we had to balance to try to get it right. And I think we did.
Well, Rockport, and you can seeing photos and now seeing the video of the speaker, you can see that kind of hallmark carbon fiber driver complement in the Taurus. And I do understand that there's a new 7.25-inch woofer in that speaker. And I was wondering if you guys could tell us a little bit about developing that driver for the Taurus.
The 7.25 came to being because we needed a driver for this application that was large enough to really have the bass extension that's required for a center channel, which, by the way, we don't believe is first octave bass, because we're trying to get enough extension to make sure that dialogue and uh, things in the upper bass are well rendered. But if you tried to make it so that it was a first octave speaker, it would be unnecessarily large, and that was one of the things we were trying to avoid. So it's not necessary for the application. However, that being said, high dynamic range and really a lot of capability from 45 hertz up is required. So our mid-range driver, the 6-inch driver, is too small to really do that. A pair of 8s is too large to do that. A pair of 9s, which is our next driver up. So actually, the 7 1/4 was the perfect Goldilocks driver, as Josh says. It was exactly in the middle, and it does a really good job of providing the required extension as well as the dynamic impact, yet keeping the cabinet small enough to be feasible in a system.
And you guys talked a little bit about the cabinet, and Rockport, of course, is known for uh, some of the most inert, well-designed, well-engineered cabinets in the industry. And I'm sure there's some special sauce in the Taurus as well. What can you tell us about the cabinet of the Taurus?
Well, it's a fully constrained layer damped, multi-layer variable section thickness cabinet, as is the Atria and Avior and Cygnus. It's not an aluminum baffled cabinet like the Lyra, but again, like Josh mentioned, we wanted to keep it so that it was reasonably priced so people could really get it into their system. But that being said, again, it's an extremely inert cabinet and very quiet and provides a very black background. And I think that people who've listened to the Atria and Avior and Cygnus recognize that these are extremely ambitious cabinets.
And Josh, you mentioned a little bit earlier about the flexibility in terms of the installation of the Taurus. And I did see in the press release that you can purchase it with a floor stand or a low plinth that would be, I guess, suitable for a shelf. Can you tell us a little bit about just all the mounting options and, exactly a little bit more about the flexibility in the product?
Sure. And what you're looking at is the stand mount. And we'll talk about how we can angle the speaker for different heights of installation. But I'm also going to slide into the picture the low plinth, which would replace the stand and allow the speaker to sit on a shelf and become a very compact unit. So this low plinth, you can have either or, one or the other, or both options with the speaker. You can add that at any time. So there's total flexibility in the product. And I would say the other aspect that we really thought a lot about was, in general, if you have a stereo system, your speakers are somewhat out from the wall, but your center channel is probably going to want to be directly against the wall, or in some cases with a screen, you might even have it built into a wall on some kind of a shelf. And so we really thought a lot about how can we accommodate those height differences, and also how can we design the bass response so that it will work well right on or in a boundary wall.
And so, in terms of, and I have to ask this question next, in terms of the porting, is it a rear ported? Is it a bottom ported speaker? How does the porting work?
It's a non-ported speaker.
Okay,
The speaker has a port, and again, because we intentionally wanted to limit the bass extension and make it so that it did integrate really well with the boundary situation that it's likely to be used with, which is the floor and the rear wall. The porting isn't necessary for a 45 hertz speaker, and so we were able to keep the cabinet uh, more flexible in terms of its installation possibilities by not having a port. And again, not needing first octave bass means we don't need to go that low.
okay. Well, tell us a little bit about the sound and the performance. I know you guys, and I visited Rockport Technologies. It was years ago, but I know that, part of the design process, you guys are heavily engineering based, but you guys listen a lot, and it has to sound exactly, the way that a Rockport Technology speaker is supposed to sound before it makes it into the line. So I'm sure that this Taurus went through many, many listening tests. Tell us a little bit about how the Taurus sounds.
Sure. Well, I'll say something first. I agree with what you said. I mean, it had to pass our test for music listening. Of course, it's mostly going to be used for dialogue in movies and in some cases vocals in music videos and things like that. But it had to pass the music test. And the best way we know to listen to a music speaker is in stereo. So and we'll talk a little bit about production, but when we designed the prototypes, we built two of them and set them up as a stereo pair. And what I would say, and I'd love to hear Andy's take on this as well, but it has the dynamic capabilities, the resolution, and definitely the tonal accuracy, both measured and perceived, of all of our speakers. And, to me, the tonal accuracy and the resolution of information, dynamic information, which is really dynamic range through low noise and the ability to play louder sounds without distortion and without restriction. Those are the hallmarks of Rockport sound, and this product has that in spades. What's really cool is we didn't intend it this way, but I think we designed a stereo speaker that can be used for situations where you can't have a tall tower style speaker, say below a window, or you want to mount a pair of stereo speakers on a shelf along a wall. This would actually make an excellent stereo product. That's how strongly we feel about its musical performance.
Wow, so you can use a pair of Taurus in a stereo configuration. That's a pretty cool application, I must admit. Well, Andy, what do you hear when you listen to the Taurus?
Pretty much what Josh was just saying. The amazing thing about it is it has a very direct and immediate kind of mid bass and low mid range, and some of that is because of its proximity to the floor. But the voicing of the speaker was done in such a way that it will be a seamless integration with any of our stereo speakers. So tonally, it's pretty much spot on with everything else. But one thing that was really impressive was the snappiness. I mean, it's a very snappy speaker and highly resolved, extremely quiet. And like Josh said, we kind of kidded ourselves, or not kidded ourselves, but we were amused to set up a stereo pair, but then really quite shocked at how good it was. It was fantastically good. So, and that's not something I've ever done with a center channel previously. So it was a very good test and a really great way to be be made confident that it does everything that all of our other speakers do. And of course, it's like I said, by necessity, slightly band limited on the bottom. But in this application, this very demanding application of a center channel, it will definitely deliver the goods.
Well,
I would add, just quickly, I would add that slightly band limited. I think if people heard it as a music speaker, they'd be surprised at how much bass there is. I mean, it really doesn't. The bottom octave bass is not rendered as fully, but it's there, and everything above that 45 hertz point is really strong and dynamic and solid. And it's a very solid and snappy sounding speaker, as Andy pointed out.
Yeah, and I guess I should be careful not to bring attention to the fact that it's band limited, but I think in most circles we're known for delivering really solid first octave bass with all of our other products, and so there is a slight difference with this because of its intended application, but it is everything it needs to be and then some, for sure.
well, that sounds terrific. And let's talk a little bit about the application and what the requirements are from an end user. Um, in terms of power requirements, I see the waveguide, so I'm sure that, I know that it's a pretty efficient speaker. What would someone need to power a Taurus in their home theater system?
Well, again, it's a much more demanding application than many people recognize because there's a huge amount of information that's locked down onto the center channel. So, and as you probably have noticed, in the context of movie soundtracks, the people who make these soundtracks are not shy about giving us big, wide dynamic range. So a speaker really needs to be able to crank when it needs to crank. Um, that being said, it's a relatively benign load. It's the sensitivity is high enough that you don't need megawatt amplifiers, but a decent 50 or 100-watt amplifier will easily do the job. And I mean, if you have a gigantic romping system, you may want to up that just a little bit. But it's very comfortable with 50 watts.
Okay. Well, and I think most big home theaters, particularly ones that have Rockport Technology speakers as part of them, I don't think that they're going to be light on the power front at all. But thanks. I mean, that sounds really it sounds great. I mean, I can't imagine what it would sound like in a system with a pair of Cygnus or a pair of Avior 2s. I would imagine it's terrific. The last question that I have is really about, how someone can get this into their system and how long it would take. Is the Taurus in production now? Are you guys shipping it as we speak, or is it coming soon?
It sure is. No, we were delayed somewhat because of the development of our brand new 7.25-inch woofer, but we shipped several units last year, and we're in full swing now this January. And what's interesting, and I just want to touch on this briefly, Andy has always designed each crossover for each Rockport speaker to a reference design curve and exactly calibrated the crossover for that exact set of drivers. And with Taurus, we do that same thing. And with a stereo speaker, after we've calibrated it, we listen to every pair. So Taurus was a slightly different thing because there's only one speaker and our reference point is stereo listening. So we developed that model. We always build two of them together. They're going to two different customers, but like every Rockport we build, they're actually a matched pair. They're actually a matched to every single Taurus we've ever make. So you could listen to them as a stereo pair, and after we calibrate the crossover, we listen to them. And that is a really special aspect of our company that our size and our focus affords us, that we can bring each pair in and spend time with usually at least 3 of us on the listening panel. Often 4 or 5 of us are listening to every pair or listening to a pair. It's a minimum of 3 people who listen because that attention to detail is such a critical part of the Rockport sound. It might be the most important element of the consistency and excellency of our products. So Taurus, yeah, Andy, go ahead.
Josh, I'd like to point out that we're not just listening to them in the sound room. The reason that they get pushed out to the sound room and listened to very carefully, we do that with the crossover still external, so that we can make any last very fine adjustments to really dial them. They come off the microphone totally dialed already by anybody else's standard. And Jeff, you've seen what I do with a microphone and with a crossover. I mean, these things are really, really good when they go into the sound room. But the listening experience affords us an opportunity to make it ever so slightly better. And so we let it break in for a bit. And then after it's broken in enough that we can go in there and make changes to it confidently, we may take one turn off a shunt coil or change something by a quarter of a microfarad. I mean, we're talking about very, very small changes that you almost can't see with the microphone and the test and measurement equipment, but you can definitely hear. So what Josh is talking about, sliding them in and listening to them, it's listening and adjusting and optimizing every single pair. And it takes time, but it definitely makes for a better product.
Well,
And
and
lastly,
go ahead,
and
Josh.
then sorry, Jeff, but and then remeasuring, because we want to make sure that there was no error, because it's the iterative process of measurement and listening that allows us to get to that result that a natural, real musical sound, like a musical instrument or like a voice.
Well, and guys, I have to tell you, it can't be overstated how important the process that you guys just described and how unique really it is to Rockport. I think from a quality control standpoint, most of the best companies, they have quality control processes in place for their products, but it's bound to be fairly unique, if not completely unique in the industry, for the president and the founder to actually listen to these products before they're shipped out to the customer. So you get the measurements, you get the listening test. It's really an assurance to the end user that you're getting exactly what a Rockport technology speaker is supposed to be, and frankly, exactly what you're paying for. And that is something, uh, it should make an owner of a Rockport speaker feel like he has something very special, that Josh and Andy listened to that product and signed off on it. And that it's through and through a Rockport Technologies product, right to the end process, which is the sound, which is obviously the most important part, the most important characteristic to any speaker. Well, guys, any final thoughts on the Taurus before we wrap up today?
I'm not sure that we touched on the ability to change the rake angle. The Taurus has an interesting and kind of unique machined aluminum shoe with a radius in it that allows the speaker to be tilted back to achieve the appropriate rake angle, depending on your seating distance and your seating height. And it's done in conjunction with a laser. So we shine a laser, and that hits the end user in a particular spot, and then we rake the speaker back so that we get the required rake angle on it, and it really helps the dial-in process and also the flexibility of the unit. Because in home theater situations, sometimes you have tiered seatings. Sometimes the people are quite close. Sometimes they're quite far, and so the adjustable rake angle is absolutely essential to being able to optimize the loudspeaker.
Fantastic. You often hear about all the setup process for a pair of stereo speakers, but it's not so, you don't hear that as much when it comes to a center channel. So it's good to know that you guys have built in a process to get it set up exactly as it should be in a customer's home theater. Well, Josh, any other thoughts on the Taurus before we wrap up?
Well, I would just add to that point that all Rockport products, including the Taurus, are set up by the dealer, and the dealer has the tools and the training to know how to set them up in a regular space, in your living room, in your dedicated home theater or media room, whatever that space is. Speakers are a unique product in that we can make something that we know performs and measures incredibly well. But then if it's placed in a room incorrectly, or that because of the room's acoustics, rooms vary greatly in their acoustic behavior, and that hasn't necessarily been thought through correctly, they could sound less than ideal. And so it's so important to have our dealers trained and understand those issues and have the tools so they can set it up. And that's a really, really important thing. And it's true of the Taurus just as much as it is with our stereo speakers. So I'm glad you brought that point up because it's really, really important. And it's another way we can ensure that our customers get what they paid for.
Yeah, that's really the final assurance, right? That someone would want, just to make sure they're getting exactly the sound that you guys intended for the product and exactly the sound that they're paying for. So, yeah, that last step of setting the product up properly in the room is critical, and it sounds like you guys have got that taken care of as well. Well, guys, I really appreciate your time today. I think the Taurus looks like a tremendous product. I'm sure it'll do really, really well for you, and I'm also glad that it's shipping now. So, guys, if you're, any of our viewers that are interested, contact your Rockport dealer and see about getting a Taurus to make your stereo system into a full home theater. And but guys, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Jeff. It was really nice to see you in lieu of a in-person visit. It was nice to talk face to face.
But hopefully
All
we
right.
can do the in-person again soon.
I certainly hope so. That would
Yeah.
be nice. Maybe later in 2022.
Great. Great. The
All
offer's
right.
always
Thanks.
open.
All
All
right.
right. See
Bye-bye.
you later.
Bye.
Bye.